All right, Bang Bang. Today is Wednesday. It's March 2nd. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Here we are. It's myself. It's Dante. It's Chief. We're going to be talking a little doc review, kind of going off of yesterday's episode. Actually, directly going off of yesterday's episode. We watched Netflix's Winter on Fire, Ukraine's Fight for Freedom. Came out in 2015. And it's just now going reviral, obviously, because people are trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that, right. I think that's exactly the case. And a lot of different companies, or production companies rather, like HBO had a version of that. Vice certainly has done pieces about the battle in Ukraine in 13, 14, 15. And that's been ongoing. Like Maxim and Vladimir on the podcast yesterday were like, this has been going on for 8 years and really longer, going back to 2006. And if you want to get super detailed, it goes back hundreds of years, to the Bolsheviks, to the Tsar. Like this is like one of those things where I get annoyed, and it's so hard to find out what's true. And everybody tries to make something that's super complex, like Ukraine's relationship to Russia and the West, and try to boil it and put it in a small box, where it's actually very complicated. And people try to, it's so politicized, where it's like, oh, well, if you're supporting Zelensky and Ukraine, well, they're actually a CIA state. And it's like, well, if you're not supporting them, then you're supporting Putin. But if you're supporting Putin, you're a fascist. And it's just, everything gets so convoluted. So like this documentary did a good job of showing at least one side of the story for what happened the last time that this really was in the news, which was they had these massive protests and conflicts with their own state about this guy who was, we'll say, Russian-leaning president at that time.
Yeah, so essentially he didn't want to join the EU.
Right.
And
it seemed like he was a puppet of Putin's.
Right.
Like he was handpicked, put in there after they broke away, and it was almost like the Soviets or Putin were like, okay, yeah, you don't have to be part of the Soviet Union anymore, but this guy's going to run your show.
And that guy, so
he wasn't just a sympathizer, he was one of Putin's like guys.
Right. So that's one of those things that's important. So if you go, and Vladimir and Maxim touched on this briefly, but we talked about it some long off time ago, that they had an election in 2004. Okay. Do you remember talking about this?
No. Yeah. Keep going.
I had a question though, before you get to that part. So 94 was when they separated, or they claimed independence. Correct.
I think it
was 91.
It's 91. Okay. So the Soviet Union falls, and they had all these, like Lithuania.
So was 94 the election?
94,
the rigged one?
No. So 94 was important because, things are still taking shape, right? So the borders are new, the governments are new, everything is new. And there was the question of what to do with these broken off, newly independent, we'll call them satellite nations that used to be in this Soviet, Union empire or their sphere. Okay. And Ukraine was certainly one of those. And what happened in 94 was that there was an agreement between Russia, Ukraine, and this is an agreement signed by then President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, who was the first and only president of Russia besides Putin after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So Russia, Ukraine, and I don't think it was NATO, but and someone can, I'm sure the comment section or whoever will fact check me on this, but United States and England. And they reached this agreement that Ukraine would return the nuclear arsenal that was stationed in Ukraine back to the new Russian country, because people were really still, you had all these breakaway states where we don't know who the fuck is going to be in charge. And Ukraine had a rather large stockpile from when in their borders from when they're part of the Soviet Union. So the Ukraine agreed to give those back to Russia in exchange for the assurance that they would never be attacked and that Russia and everybody else would respect their borders. So that was 1994. So 91, the Soviet Union officially collapses and falls. Ukraine is formed. 94, they surrender their inherited nuclear arsenal back to Russia, with the understanding that Russia would
not use it against them,
and would not attack them. So it's not only like we won't nuke you, but if Ukraine was sitting there with a stockpile of nuclear weapons, I think Putin would think twice about invading.
Yeah,
because it's like, well, that was like Ukraine was like, all right, we want to join the world, right? Like we don't want to be seen as this rogue nuclear state. We want to join the world. We want to be a part of the UN. We're going to play ball. We'll give back the nukes, as long as you guys promise to respect our our borders.
So when was their first free election?
So that was
rigged. I thought that was 94.
That wasn't their first free election, but they had an election in 2004, and they run on 5 and 6 year terms. So they had a runoff between same kind of two-party system. They had one guy, this guy Viktor Yushchenko. He's the quote-unquote independent party, and against Viktor Yanukovych, who was featured heavily in the documentary. Right. Okay, so in 2004, Yushchenko is part of this. They call it the Orange Revolution. They mentioned that. So this is Ukrainian, and this guy is definitely more pro-Western. Putin tries to assassinate him through poison.
Oh, okay. So this is the guy with the face.
This is the guy with the face. Correct. So Harry, if you can pull up,
which I remember that story. I was shocked that they didn't bring that in. They kind of glossed over.
Yeah, big time.
So you remember that like immediately. That was so fucked up.
Yeah, that was because that's a very notable dog walk too. I remember doing that episode with Chief in here and being like, "Holy fuck!" Like that's another level.
Yeah,
you're not just
and this is 20 years ago. Like Putin's been doing this shit since day one.
Dude,
so
look at what happened to his fucking face.
I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
So my question was, okay, so this guy wins. They find out that the election was totally rigged.
Right.
So
Viktor Yushchenko loses the election. Viktor Yanukovych wins. Then they do like an election review, and it was like this, like you said, this thing is fucking rigged. So I don't know
who got it after.
It was
Alexander Turkinov,
but
he was the acting, and then Petro Poroshenko took over for 5 years, and he looks like he was in the Fatherland Party or the Blok Petro Poroshenko.
So here is my question, and the doc didn't really answer. How did Yanukovych win the next election fairly?
That's contested.
Was this just a country that was breaking away from communism? They had no idea how to operate as like
yes,
a capitalistic, free, democratic, like country. Is that why they were just in disarray and people were like, okay, we need a guy that, has some old school in him?
Dude, if you really think about it, how does this not happen more?
How does what not happen more?
Like, it feels like nothing ever changes is because the people on top don't let it change.
Yeah.
So, like, if you got someone who's there who's just like, no, this is it. And you got no one that could really push back and like do something about it.
I think that's what happened in this country. Like we had a fucking outsider, shit went nuts. So the pendulum swung back the other way to a career politician. It's kind of similar.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. Like think of shit here where it's like, how is this not like whatever? How does this happen? Like but it's just like, oh, sorry, party line. Like this is the way it is. Like,
that always drives me crazy too.
Like to promote change, like you have to.
Well, everybody promotes change.
Everyone promotes change, but they actually follow through with change.
Yeah,
nobody. So Yanukovych won, and you said it was contested. They made it sound like he won for like.
Oh, so in 2004, he won the initial election. Okay. It was deemed fraudulent by any, there had all sorts of, third party UN inspectors, things like that. Like, this is fraudulent. They agree to a runoff. Yushchenko wins pretty convincingly, 52% to 44%. Yanukovych, concedes on like basically New Year's Eve 2004. He runs again in 2010 and beats this woman, Yulia Tymoshenko. Probably going to be close on that. And that one, you can say for whatever reason, and again, like I'm not going to try to pronounce what party she was from because and if you look at, they kind of do like the map, right? Like how we do the map, where it's like red versus blue. Okay. Well, if you look where all the votes are from, they're from the eastern part of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then, where these historically after 2014, Crimea, everywhere else, that those places had still identified with Russia more so than Ukraine.
I mean, they were separatists. They broke away and formed.
But that's one of those things where it's like it's so hard to know what the truth is, because if you talk to some people, they're like, yeah, like, well, it was like a separatist movement with like these Ukrainian rebels who didn't want to be a part of Ukraine. And then you hear like, well, yeah, but also maybe Russia was sending in people who were Ukrainians, but they're really like not secret service, but like special forces. Like they called them like the little green men that showed up.
I get it.
And they contributed, they donated weapons and this whole thing. So it became this contested region. So I don't know what the truth is, but that's what both sides say. So
now, wasn't she Western leaning too, though?
She was.
Yeah. And then she got captured or something. Or there was an alleged capture. Wasn't there like a video that was very fishy that something I don't know.
That was from a different dog walk. That was from a different dog walk.
Sorry.
And that was what country was that? I think that was Belarus.
Oh, okay.
Who's also involved in this.
Yeah. I don't know. Harry, can we pull every single one and link that? Because I feel like we've probably covered this maybe 3 or 4 times
over the years. Yeah.
It would be helpful for like people to.
Right. Because I think we did one on just Putin and all, because we were talking about Navalny.
Yeah.
And it was like, so we did an episode on the Navalny thing. Then we did an episode on highlighting all of Putin's political assassinations and capturings and all these different things that he's done.
And his hunting lodge.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Dude, that's nothing. Yeah. I have a blog in drafts that hopefully goes up today. Have you seen his compound? His $1.6 billion compound?
I blogged it. I blogged it maybe like 6 months ago.
Did you? When the Navalny video broke?
Yeah. Right, exactly. And then he had like that compound and a couple other places removed from Google search.
Yeah,
somehow.
They said it's like a state. They said it's like almost the size of Rhode Island.
How big it is?
Yeah.
Well, Russia's so fucking huge.
Explain Navalny again too, because let's make sure
Navalny started off as like this YouTube anti-Putin Russian who eventually rose to so much prominence that he became a viable opposition leader. And he was, running for office, and basically Putin accused him of every single crime you can imagine against the state. There's all sorts of threats and, supposed assassination plots. He escaped to England, but, Putin had killed a lot of people in England. So then he was going back, and they basically just arrested him, fade on sight kind of thing. Like he lands, and then he went on a hunger strike. And that was a story in the news for a while, and it kind of just disappeared. So I think he's still, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong on this, but imprisoned in somewhere in Russia. But he was like the opposition leader.
Well, they tried to kill him too. They tried to poison him. They almost got him, but I mean, it's fucking insane over there. And back to the presidential election that the guy won. Did he run on a pro-EU platform? Is that how he actually drummed up some support?
So there was, and the documentary said that, and talking to Maxim and Vladimir a little bit, they kind of said that too, is that they had this deal in place that they were going to not necessarily officially join the EU, but have stronger trade relations with the EU. Like so they weren't going to be an official member the way that they're pushing to be a member now, but they were going to have very strong economic ties. And what was that expression from they got rugged? And when we were talking about NFTs, it seems like he just at the last second got rugged.
But it seemed like when they were interviewing the civilians, and that guy who was the dentist who was really fucking smart, and they also interviewed a surgeon too that was really smart in the doc, and they both said that it wasn't just for the financial reasons and the monetary shit. It was also because it would give them protection and peace of mind that someone had their back against Russia in case what's fuck's happening now happen.
Right. And that's one of those things where it's like, one of Putin's lines was like, we have to denazify Ukraine. Okay. That he's accusing them of being Nazis. And part of the reason why he invoked that line is because in World War II, Ukraine helped the Nazis because they had been run over by the Soviet Union and the Bolsheviks and conquered. And what happened when that, immediately basically, they collectivized all the farms, and Ukraine is like, the Iowa or the Kansas of that region. Like they're the breadbasket of that country. So they collectivize all these wheat farms, these grain farms, and persecute these people. 6 million, reportedly as many as 6 million Ukrainians starved to death, okay, because of Russian Soviet policy. So they see this conquering army come in, like, well, we don't know much about the Nazi ideology per se, but we know they're not starving us. So, but who can always be like, well, back then those guys were Nazis, so it's like, hey, they're still Nazis. We need to get the Nazis out, okay? So that's like part of like the line. And then the other side would say, well, this guy is a CIA plant. And it's like, well, yeah. Okay, there's probably some truth to that.
Who is that line being fed to, though? Is that being fed to the Russian people? I mean, the international...
I think they're trying to feed it to everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think I saw Netflix, like, denied a documentary produced by Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're trying to, like, there's like
But
bots that their Twitter's like has an algorithm now that's like getting bots out of there.
Who's buying that though? Like I
think people are buying it. And I think that, and look at the CIA involvement in, toppling foreign governments, either peacefully or not peacefully. They have a long history of that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm talking about the Putin telling the world that they need to denazify
I don't know that
Ukraine.
anybody is buying that. I don't know, but that was one of the lines. And
I saw that he made that comment in a press conference last week. But who's he trying to speak that to?
I don't know.
His people?
I don't know if that's to his people, the world at large. If he's trying to just give himself cover, for going in, because that's
probably all the above.
Probably all the above. Yeah, probably all the above. But in that same speech or around the same time, he also it sounded a lot like nationalism, right? It wasn't about
100%.
And the other thing he keeps trying to say and has been saying since 2014 when they went into Crimea and then Eastern Ukraine is that they're all one people. Ukrainians and Russians, we're all one people. We're all one people. And one of the things that really, really ratcheted this up and pissed him off was the Ukrainian Orthodox Church left the Russian Orthodox Church. So the Russian, those are, they're two very powerful churches in Christianity, and the Ukrainian church had always been like, underneath the Russian Orthodox Church, and people are still fairly religious there, probably more so than here. And
dude, big time. Ukrainian Village.
Well, those churches are immaculate. That's where I live, and you live there now too.
Crazy.
So they're beautiful.
Yeah,
and the great mosaics. The golden domes on top, and they're doing major reconstruction on the one on Cortez.
Yeah.
So they got great churches, but that had always been a thing. So it's almost like a hierarchy system where it's like, hey, Ukrainians, like you report up to the Russians, and then the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was like, fuck those guys. Probably said it. They didn't say the F word because they're Ukrainians and they're God-fearing people. But so they appealed to this other archdiocese that Russia reported, and it's like, all right, you guys can actually be separate. And I guess that like Putin talks about that all the time. Like you can find statements about how like, hey, like this is not right, and and he always tries to say like we're one people and we're a Slavic people, and that's been a Russian way of thinking. Like that's why World War I started.
But all right, so that's a great point, and that's a question I kept asking myself during this documentary. Watching the brutality, this wasn't an invading army from across the ocean coming in, and
correct.
These were literally like family and friends,
mm-hmm.
the same fucking people living in the same city, like brutalizing each other. And it's the same thing basically with
mm-hmm.
what Russia's doing now. It's like,
I mean, we do that stuff too. I mean, like the police, if they know who signs their checks, And that happens all over the world where it's like, it's very hard.
We'll get into that. I want to ask you about that. But while watching this documentary, I was looking so forward to this today because I know the dog walks you guys have done in the past on this. I know you guys are like really well versed in this subject. And I know I was really looking forward to getting your...
Well, I mean,
do you feel really well versed? Because I don't.
I'll tell you what.
I think you know a lot about this.
I would not be able to hold the conversation I just had if it weren't for you giving us what you've given us on the show.
Yeah,
So
I think you're real.
I would say I'm not well versed at all, but I'm at least a little knowledgeable about it, and I hope the audience is too. So,
Yeah,
because that was always the goal with this.
I was texting you last week when all this popped off and was asking your opinion because I think you're pretty good go-to source for this subject. But back to the doc. So did you or did anybody realize when this first started, when these people congregated, also, who's Mustafa? That was another thing that they alluded to at the beginning. They said, we logged on Facebook and Mustafa posted this. I took it as like almost like anonymous.
I think it was a random. Really?
Yeah, they had a lot of followers because they said Mustafa posted.
I took it as just a
meet at the Maidan
protest organizer.
Yeah,
that's what I took it.
They were like, everybody meet at the Maidan. Everyone showed up, and it seemed like good times. Like they had music going, people were dancing, and like it seemed like a good-natured protest. Right. And then fucking fast forward 91 days later.
Right.
The progression was insane. It went from plastic sticks to metal sticks to
guns, slugs,
pellet guns,
slugs,
real guns. Like,
right.
It was wow.
And, and the protesters are, there are scenes where you had 5-6 protesters beating the shit out of a police officer too. It was just like, this is absolutely fucking chaos, and Molotov cocktails and things like that. It's gotten crazy, and like that's.
Where did you think things started to really spiral out of control?
I mean, I don't know that anything has really changed. I mean, from 150 years ago.
I think that seeing, and they kept bringing it up and referring back to it. I think seeing with the Berkut.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so, that was bad. That's been disbanded.
So you had the regular police, right? Like the Polizia. Then what's the Berkut? Is that like the SWAT team or?
Well, that's something that I'd like to hear both sides of the story on. But the doc only gave us one. Like the people on the ground in Ukraine were like, these were actually like kind of paid, criminals. Given
that was the like Tushutsky or something like that. They emptied out the prison and paid these guys $10 a day to like
beat the shit out of people.
Dude, that was so fucked up.
Yeah. I think the Berkut, I had that confused then, so I don't know.
So they were like an elite, either police or
heavily armed, body armor, helmets, face shield, the whole thing.
That's the only thing I wish that's the only thing I thought the doc was missing was, it did a great job just from ground footage and getting people's accounts, the people in it, which was like firsthand, like I'm in the mud experience, but they should have cut back and had some like knowledgeable person that would have like a sit down, like in front of the camera and a light interview to kind of shade in some confusion, because it really was just like, hey, here you go.
I think if you were a Ukrainian, it was like a recap. You knew everything inside out.
I think that's how it was produced.
Right. Being on the up, because it was all subtitles.
Right.
It was like no English, but being on the outside, not knowing who these different groups were, it was kind of like...
You're right, because I have no idea. At Berkut, I have no idea.
But I think seeing them literally beat the shit out of little kids and girls and women, I think that was when the protesters were like, okay, fuck these guys.
Well, and they made...
it went to a whole different level.
That one scene where they're showing, like they're trying to... It was in the early stages where they had the heavily armored police... And they had you had two walls.
The crush of people.
Crushing. It felt like I was watching that Battle of the Bastards with Jon Snow, where he's just getting crushed over. And I was like, holy shit, like people are going to get suffocated and crushed. It was fucking wild. And then it get ratcheted up from that. But they just kept trying to like engulf and crunch the protesters like at that Maidan Square. And that Maidan is... And if you listen to the show yesterday, those guys described it well, but it's basically just the city center of Kiev. It's like, so a lot of those Eastern European and European cities in general, I know they're all over Poland, have these giant, like sometimes like a mile around squares, and they're just open areas. It's like the town square, and like that's how the cities were designed. Like this is the hub, and nowadays there's just all bars and restaurants and shops around those city squares, and so that's like the Kiev people. Is it Kiev or Kiev?
Dude, I don't know.
I think it's Kiev.
Kiev.
I thought it was cool hearing.
Kiev's a chicken.
But it's from Kiev. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I thought it was cool hearing the native people pronounce Ukraine like Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah, we just westernize everything.
Yeah. Well, same thing with like poor Vladimir. Like he tells us the name, and so this we had yesterday. He's a doctor, and he.
Yep.
So he was on the show, Dante. I don't know if it's airing now, so you probably didn't
I know.
see
I can't wait to listen to it.
Yes, the guy couldn't turn on his camera because there's a no light order. He couldn't turn on the light in his apartment.
That's how dangerous it is.
Yes.
There.
So he's just sitting on his phone
In the dark.
In the dark, and his name was Vladimir, and it's spelled Vladimir, but that's just how they pronounce it.
Yeah. Well, they spell it differently too. It's VOLO.
DYMYR.
Yeah, that's the Ukrainian version.
Okay.
That's great. I would never be able to pronounce that. Looking at that.
Hey, let's take a quick break here because we got to talk about Roman. Obviously, if you're having sex and you're not using Roman, what are you doing? Roman is an online men's health company, and they're changing the game with these Roman swipes because it's a secret to lasting longer during sex. They are clinically proven as a way to last longer in bed. They're effective, easy to use, and they're fast acting, but they don't require a prescription. Roman can ship the swipes to you in discreet, unmarked packaging, and each swipe packet is small enough to hide in your wallet for whenever you need it. They're super easy to use. Just take the swipe out of the packet, swipe it on, let it dry. You're good to go. That's it. St. Patrick's Day is around the corner. I know you might have maybe a bad story. Maybe you put on a bad performance when, the girl wearing the Pinch Me I'm Irish t-shirt. Well, let's up the game now. Let's get some swipes. Let's get it going. Go to GetRoman.com/dogwalk to get your first month of swipes for just $5 when you choose a monthly plan. That's GetRoman.com/dogwalk. Go do it. Go get some swipes. Let's start performing better in the bedroom. All right, let's hop back into the episode.
Yeah, so it is like but your point about like, oh man, I was trying to tie that back to World War I because that is how, like you said, like how did this all unravel? And it's like, well, Russia has had this thing about are we part of Europe or not since like the formation of the country. Like St. Petersburg, you've heard of that city?
Yeah,
obviously. So that city was a fucking nothing swamp, okay? And Peter the Great just decided like we need to be.
It was the greatest city in the world at one point, right?
Well, and they built it. There was nobody there, nobody living there. And they were just like, we need a seaport and a navy in order to be a world power. We're going to build it right here. And then he moved, like he went all in, like moved the capital of St. Petersburg. Everything was about St. Petersburg. They started getting, into, European royal society. The czars did at that time. And so there's intermingling with, the English crown. There's like that story about how, in World War I, Tsar Nicholas and his wife, Kaiser Wilhelm, and then the King of England at the time were all first cousins. So they're all they're all direct descendants of Queen Victoria in England. So it's like you had like basically like a family squabble was World War I. Yeah. And then the Russian Revolution happened during that time and killed all the czars. But that was like a thing. So Peter the Great wanted Russia to be more European. And then the Bolsheviks knock out the czars and they're like, fuck Europe. Like we're our own thing. And so they isolated, talk about that Iron Curtain. Like they basically created a wall of information and trade and everything else between them. So like you're not going through here, this wall with Russia and the Soviet Union and the rest of the world. And China obviously did the same thing. North Korea has done the same thing. Like when you have these, they're basically police states, and they're a police state because they don't let people leave. Okay, so that whole Berlin Wall thing was like, why do you need the wall? Not to keep the West from coming in, it's to keep all their citizens from leaving. They're trapping those people in.
So I know we're bouncing fucking all over the place with this. I could talk about this for 2 hours with you. I'm like so intrigued by it all. Watching this doc and watching how fucking passionate these people were not just because they valued liberty and freedom so much, but they actually knew the difference between freedom and not having freedom. They had just come from being, enslaved by communism. They had a taste of freedom, and they were willing to literally fucking die rather than go back to that. So watching that and seeing what's going on now today
makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense that the reports are that they're fighting their balls off.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so like I was asking myself this question over and over. Like, if you're Putin, one of the best college professors I had at Loyola, he was a lieutenant in the Navy. He was fucking brilliant and the coolest, nicest guy ever. Professor John Williams. He always used to tell us there was this phrase when it comes to war, and it's if you break it, you buy it, like the crate and barrel theory.
Yep.
And it applied to Iraq. It applied to Afghanistan. And if you go in there and fuck shit up and take it over, you own it. You have to deal with that all. And if you're Putin and what's going on now, and you know the history of this, these people would rather die than serve you and claim to be a part of your country. Like, what the fuck is the point?
What is the end game here?
This is never going to end. Even if they conquer Ukraine, do you think these people are ever going to stop fighting?
You have to. I don't think you can assume that Putin will use that same theory. You break it, you buy it. He might just say, "Fuck that pile of rubble."
But it's extremely valuable. Like you said, it's valuable farmland. They have access to the Black Sea, which I brought that up to you last week. That was a theory going around. A bunch of people told me I'm a fucking idiot for believing it. But they said that he wants that pipeline to flow through Ukraine to the Black Sea. It's a warm water port, which they don't have many of, but obviously they have one in Crimea. But I don't like. What do you think the end game is here? Do you think it's ego, not the end game? What do you think is fueling all this?
I don't know. It seems like a very dangerous game because he has also created this class of oligarchs who are insanely wealthy, they own all the soccer team, the Chelsea and all, different soccer teams. They have crazy money, and it's like,
but that's it though.
But if those people, if they are, like, you would think that meant like that's his base, but it's like they can't use their own money. They can't leave, like
and they're like bleeding money too.
Right, they're
like
locked out of SWIFT, and
someone showed me like some type of chart that was like in comparison to 2008. And like it's like way worse.
Yeah.
Like way worse.
Really?
Yes.
Yep.
Right there now for the people, like the economy is like way worse than it was here in 2008.
Yeah.
What sucks is the regular people are the ones suffering from that.
Right.
So it's like, we're boycotting all their shit except for their fucking gas and oil, which is what we should have been doing years ago.
They stopped construction on Nord 2 though.
Okay, but the people that's like really hurting, like these billionaires, it's putting a dent in their,
but
it's taking a zero off their fucking account.
So it's a person who needs 20,000 rubles to buy a thing
exactly.
of bread.
Those are the people that this is really gonna fuck, and it's like those people have been living under this for decades and decades already.
Yeah, I think there's still I don't know how popular Putin is in Russia, but he's certainly more popular than his predecessor Boris Yeltsin, because Yeltsin. We watched the documentary about the Penguins. Yeah. Okay, what was the name of that one? You remember that?
The Red Penguins.
Red Penguins, and they if you've seen the movie, not Independence Day, Air Force One with Harrison Ford, where there's that scene where you have this guy who's trying to like take over Air Force One. He's like, we release this general because he's going to come back and he's going to restore glory to Russia, and it was like you Westerners turned my country into like a place of prostitutes and gangsters, and the economy was terrible. Like it was very unsafe there, and Putin kind of came in and had this plan, and he had like these nationalistic vibes, and this is kind of to your point where it's like, what is his end game? I don't know what his end game is, but if you take him at his word and the things that he says, he believes that Russia, like the world's better off. Like he calls the fall of the Soviet Union one of the great political disasters of the 20th century, like the fall of the Soviet Union, where everyone else seems to celebrate it. but he thinks that Russia deserves a seat at the table as one of the world powers. How invading Ukraine gets you closer to that, I don't see that, because now you've pissed everybody off. And I think there's some legitimate claims of, threats with the growing, of NATO moving further and further east. But like, NATO never attacked a free sovereign nation. Like, they wouldn't attack Russia.
To me, NATO is one step above the UN peacekeepers. They're useless.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably just because of the age that we grew up in.
They do what they're doing now. They supply, that's another thing about this doc. They supply ammo and medicine and medical workers, and they kind of sit back and say, we're not getting involved. That was another thing about this doc that blew my mind.
I mean, there are a lot of people bringing in supplies. You see Elon drop something off, and
Starlink, baby.
There's something going on with these Turkish drones I saw that are like a huge help.
Really? Because I thought Turkey was more. It was.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
So like, listen, there's like a lot of research and stuff too. I just kind of like clicked in and clicked out.
I think those countries over there where Russia is right on their doorstep fucking realize this guy is hell-bent on power.
Yeah, so
he's a maniac.
Here's this. Ukraine credits Turkish drones with eviscerating Russian tanks and armor in their first use in major conflict.
Okay, but does that mean they...
That's what I don't know. That's what I don't know.
I don't know if that means they're Turkish made and bought by Ukraine.
That's what it very well could be.
Because if I'm Russia and I'm like, well, Turkey just attacked us. Fuck them. Here, blow up Istanbul.
That's what I said. I was like, wait, Turkish drones. And then so I was like, wait, but if they're made in Turkey, that I thought
maybe that doesn't make sense either. But I don't know.
Whatever these Turkish drones are, that they're helping a lot.
Okay, that's surprising. Did you see the thing today that they're starting to close in on Kyiv? They had a 40-mile long convoy.
It's been going there since yesterday.
40-mile long convoy. I saw like a satellite image of it. I was like, holy shit. Yeah. And then this is the one thing I didn't have like the heart to say it to those guys in the podcast yesterday. Like, we need a no-fly zone. We need a no-fly zone. Fuck that. Like, you do a no-fly zone and we have NATO planes and U.S. planes getting into air battles with, Russians. That's World War III. Like, that really is World War III. Like, I think it is. It reminds me like a little of that Cuban Missile Crisis, where like everything's on a nice knife's edge, where it's like, if you escalate this and it goes sideways, it's going to go sideways very quickly all over the world. And so I feel like people have to be very careful with crossing that line, where we're going to use it's one thing to give supplies and money and things like that. It's another to be like, we're going to fight you in the air. Like, that's an act of war. Then you're at war. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I don't know, man. It's and like to kind of wrap things up here too. Like, go check other things out. We're not the most well versed in all of this thing.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if really anybody is, but
it's so hard, and it's like I keep trying to. I listened to this podcast that was like an hour and a half long, and it was from this guy. I'm like, this guy seems like pretty smart. And I'm blanking on his name right now, but he taught at West Point, and then it's like and he's well published. He's been in cited all over the place, and I look him up, and now he works for something called the American. It's a AEI, which is a right wing think tank, and you research them a little bit, and it's like, I don't know if I trust that think tank, because they're the ones who are like kind of in on going to Iraq. They did have the strategy. They came, like, this guy largely came up with the strategy for the surge, which kind of helped Iraq in 2007. And he's kind of like the Russian military historian expert. But it's like, okay, but like, do we really want to, like, what's that guy's angle? Is that guy, who's that guy? Who supplies this think tank? Is it Raytheon?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't, like, all the sources, like, it's so hard to parse through all the information, find out what is quote unquote true, and then be like, well, why is this being pushed out there?
It's impossible to take anything at face value.
You can't.
Yeah, you can't do it.
And I do think that is like one of the biggest problems. And I think that, to your point earlier, Dante, at the start, being like, who's buying that line? Well, I think there are people who buy things or maybe not buy, but dismiss things where it's like, well, who knows what's real anyway, so let them figure it out. And it's like, well, I'm not sure that's the right course of action either. So it's hard to.
Yeah. And my last point before we wrap up here, that barrier that they made, that homemade makeshift out of ice and fucking garbage cans and you name it.
Benches.
Yes. What a fucking barrier.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Tire fires.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's innovation. We're going in their eyes.
Yeah.
That was, and not even to mention, how cold is it there when they're doing all this shit?
Super fucking
And
cold.
they're just on the fucking lines, dude.
Yeah.
That's fucking hard.
Well, and like just use what's around. So if like when I saw that, like the big snow pile walls, where it's like, well, these guys have been to a Jewel Osco. Yeah. Like those, they looked like a Jewel Osco in the winter with those mounds and mounds of ice.
Fuck yeah.
Packed around. Yeah.
What was each of your biggest takeaways watching this?
I'm so in my own head that I just like, I'm watching it, but I'm like, the whole time I'm wondering, like, I wonder what the other side says. You know, where it's just, but it's another, but the other thing I guess was you don't want to fuck with that part of the world. Like that part of the world. And, you know, and I used to work for a Polish company. I think we've talked about that before, but how much they hate Russia and the Soviet Union. And it was like, you know, and these guys are in their 40s and 50s. These were my bosses. And so they remember what it was like, you know, early 80s, late 70s under Soviet, you know, they were a Soviet satellite nation. But that was the other thing about like what I was saying was like NATO was like this free thing. All of those countries that were in the Warsaw Pact back then, Russia conquered them after World War II. So they didn't freely become communists and join Russia. Russia put heads of state in all those places. What they did to Poland back then, like they would just, you know, be like, hey, are you in the military? Are you a business owner, doctor, educator? We're trying to form a new government. So they bring all these people in and then they just execute them. So they got rid of like this entire kind of elite class so they could just subjugate the rest of the people. So they cut the head off the snake kind of thing. And it was just like, you know, but they lured them in under false pretenses. Hey, we're rebuilding Poland.
So again, so like what the fuck do you want to run a country like that for?
I don't know.
Like I that's the thinking that I can't fucking understand.
But that was 1946, you know.
Dude, but still, like, so this is 2014 this is happening and these people are like that was a war.
Yeah.
That was a war between the police and the citizens of the state. If what's it, Lukashenko,
yeah.
If you're him sitting in your palace or presidential palace watching all this unfold after 90 days, like, doesn't it hit you like, hey,
people love power, man.
Shouldn't we maybe we should sit down at the table and figure something out because this is not good for anybody. No. It just, I don't know, man. It's just so fucking disappointing and
my takeaway is like how insane it would be to be in a situation where you still hold your ground there while people literally right next to you are getting gunned. You know, like in that guy on the stretcher when he had that stretcher to get that person.
Dude, they had snipers.
And it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like to be in that situation.
Dude, I mean, we're seeing it that to like the nth degree now. Like one of the things the guy said yesterday was that like the homeless population has mobilized and organized and they're collecting bottles to make Molotov cocktails. Yeah. And it's like, it is literally everyone, all hands on deck to defeat the Russians. And it's, I don't know. And I guess like, I think it is like, we don't want to live like that again. And like what I was going to say about the Polish guys, like they would, like if they had a pair of blue jeans or they got an orange in their stocking for Christmas.
Yeah.
Like you're like, look at what I got. I got a pair of jeans and an orange, like greatest Christmas ever. Cause they just had no money, no anything. They weren't allowed to have anything.
Nothing.
So
it's crazy, man. But I think you once again, I'm going to ask what our rating system is. Would recommend, and would not recommend. Wasn't that it or no?
I think this is the best one we've watched yet. I'm not ashamed to admit I like cried at the end. I like teared up when they finally got Parliament to push through that order and seeing young kids, old people,
Yeah.
religious people, like homeless people, everybody just celebrating and enjoying the fact that they accomplished something monumental. I mean, it was the human spirit, man. It was fucking unbelievable.
And that is one of those things where it's like you see all these people now. There's like a faction, there's people I talk to. They're like, oh, like, and it's like it's probably like the same people who are like crazy into like the QAnon, but they're like, yeah, like, this Zelensky and like this, they don't even really have a democracy. Like he's like a CIA prop. I'm like, you know what, dude, that documentary, okay, that is democracy. Like we have this group of people who said, fuck this guy. We'll stay out here in the dead of winter for 90 days, battling, fighting for our rights that we want.
Revolution.
That is a populist democracy. And if that's not democracy, then I don't know what the fuck is, because that's just people being like, look at, like, we didn't vote for this fucking guy. We got rugged on this deal. We want to do things this way, and we're going to show our, have a show of force, which was peaceful until the police got involved, and then they made real change. So that, to me, like, if that's not democracy, I don't know what is. So
it reminded me, one of my favorite quotes of all time from Thomas Jefferson, and I think people should be reminded of it more often, is the tree of liberty needs to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants from time to time.
Yep.
And it's true when you think about it.
And he also had the quote that was like, when a government fears its people, that's liberty, and when the people fear the government, that's tyranny.
100%.
And I think that is,
this was a great reminder that the people have the fucking power, not the other way around. And this was a great example of the government ruling through their number one go-to, fear.
Yeah. Well, and they made that very clear in that documentary too, about like, and the same thing that's going on in Russia now, where it's like, and Maxim and Vladimir said this too, that if you are found helping people in Ukraine, jail instantly. They had these signs on the documentary being like, we're going to take away the internet. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Like, they would do everything they could to put the fear of God into these people, fear of the government. And these people say, fuck you.
They would rather die than
capitulate,
than lose. Yeah. And I mean, once you're dealing with people like that, you're never going to win.
Yeah.
You can never win.
Yep.
All right, then. Go check it out. It's on Netflix.
He wants to transition from that to Love is Blind.
Yeah. So Chief just casually
We've talked about it.
Yeah. Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Somewhere. I don't remember where.
All right. I think I might write something later about this. My fucking head is still spinning about this whole thing.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one person in this office that would try out for that show and almost go on, who would it be?
None, to be quite honest.
If you had to, gun your head, I think Ryan would be the last person I would pick in this whole office. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I said this out there. You hate shit like this. I know, but you hate conjured up, artificial, just mind numbing rubbish like this show. And this show is like one of those.
But he's a romantic. You're
and I also while I detest it on some levels, I also love trash TV. Like I used to live tweet The Bachelor.
I could see you on that show. I cannot see you on this fucking.
To me, they're all the same.
Sit and talk to a faceless person.
I do that all day on the internet. Talk to faceless people on the internet. That's this whole job.
But they have to propose to this person and get engaged to them.
Yeah,
and they fucking do it. And these people are like, after 3 days, like, I think this is the one.
I would play the game and then I would rug that girl.
I mean, at this point, it's no different than online dating. I mean, right? Like, at one point, it was a lot different because people met 3 people through connections or whatever.
I disagree.
I was talking to my cousin yesterday, and he got married later in life, and he's like, and someone we were on this conference call thing, and he's with it doesn't matter, but and they're like, oh, how'd you meet your wife? And he goes, I met her analog. And he's like, what does that mean? He's like, we were out running, and I just like bumped into her and met her on the street. I feel like that everybody meets digitally now. We met analog.
That's great.
So
Wow.
like, yeah. So
of course, there's the aspect of people just go on those shows to become famous.
that's
So
what I was doing
if
it
that's
for.
the big difference.
Yeah.
then yeah, I agree. Maybe I
And they sniffed you out.
backtrack.
So yeah, well, I mean, I didn't really. So like the first casting girl, she DM'd me, and I'm like, I thought it was like, you're fucking like, who put you up to this? And she goes, no, I swear, like here's my LinkedIn, blah blah blah. So then we went through, and interviewed and whatever, and I was like, and she's like, so do you think you want to go to the next phase? I'm like, I don't know, like I'll get back to you. This is after the first one. Then I looked up the guy who was like one of the more popular guys from season 1. And at that time, he had like 890,000 Twitter or Instagram followers. I'm like, I'll do it. So I'm
Whore.
sitting here.
You're a whore.
Fuck, this is our job.
You're a whore.
This is our job. So I was sitting there at the time. I mean, I only have like 20K now. So I was sitting there being like, yeah, I could use a little million person bump on my follower.
It
account.
is like this season, it's all Chicago people.
It's filmed here.
Oh, it
Oh,
is?
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, that's fucking
That's
weird.
that's why I think they're only looking for Chicago people, which is why I got contacted.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So this is funny because it all started because Carl came over and said, do you guys know some Love is Blind show? This guy Shane reached out and wants to be on an interview. And then Chief was like, oh yeah, I was almost on that show.
And they were like, well, we don't want anybody who's like trying to be famous. And I'm like, well,
It's literally all it is.
I'm like, and they like would not accept that. They're like, no, these people believe in love. I'm like, okay. But I'm like, if I was involved, like that would be a bit like our audience would watch. Like I don't know what percentage you think you have of our audience now, but like it would be huge in the Barstool world. We have a rabid fan base, like
I know.
main accounts got 3 million, like whatever. And their response was, our show's already a cultural phenomenon.
Oh, God.
We don't need your audience. And I was like, okay.
I tried the same thing I applied for the casting call for Legends of the Hidden Temple. They're rebooting it. And
They are with adults?
oh yeah.
I did not know that.
I sent the whole fucking thing. I was like,
That'd be sweet.
I was like, I dressed up as it one year for Halloween. I used to watch it every night on gas. Like blah 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 blah. Oh, my fucking teammate is even more obsessed.
I did one.
We'll
with,
kill it. Never even heard from him.
I did one with White Sox Dave, and it was a complete waste of my time.
What was it?
It was like they were.
First-
it wasn't really a waste of our time because like
I vaguely remember something
we
about
actually
baseball,
like
right?
we actually kind of kept advancing, but then it got to the point where it's like, oh, you got to ask Dave Portnoy to like if you want to. I was like, you know what, like.
And you're too afraid of him.
That's just not one of those things where it's like worth, you know what I mean? Because if we knew for sure we were going to get it,
What was
then
it?
It's like it was kind of like to what I understand, like not The Amazing Race, but The Amazing Race meets like you got to find awesome memorabilia for a man cave.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it sounds cool. It sounds like it'd be really fun. I mean, mine sucks, but like.
Imagine how good it would be if you went on that show.
Yeah, but like, could you imagine me having to drag White Sox Dave around? We would kill each other. It'd be great content.
Amazing content.
It'd be great content.
Maybe you should. What was this? Does this show ever happen?
I don't know if it did. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Maybe you should just hijack it.
Confidentiality or
Maybe you should
whatever.
just hijack it and
Yeah.
do it with Dave yourself.
That'd be funny.
Here's
gotta
your
get-
man cave. Decorate it.
We've been kicking around the idea whether it's living in a cave or something, but we need some kind of like Big Brother show where Eddie and Dave live together.
I don't think it could happen, boys.
You know what?
Would you rather live with Dave,
You know
White
what?
Sox Dave, or Marty and Dana? After watching that egg video, the nonstick pan.
Yeah, I mean, I still got to take Marty and Dana.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Whoa!
That is
Ouch.
ouches,
Dave
right?
But
has a
here's the
dog.
difference.
Dave has a
Here's the
dog,
difference.
though.
Is like
He hates dogs.
You could deal with stupidity, but I can't deal with arguing. And Dave's a professional arguer, so we would just argue a lot. I wouldn't
But you
argue with
don't
Marty
thi-
and Dana much.
You don't think so?
No, I would. I don't think so.
You don't think you'd be
And I'm
standing
not
in
saying I'm some intellect.
right,
but-
but you don't think you'd be standing in that kitchen and be like, "Hey, fucking idiot."
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, I would. But then
Yeah.
like they like laugh it off. He would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's the fucking pan's fault. Look at this way, you fucking moron. Look at this. Some fucking dude on Twitter with 11 followers says you're an idiot. See, motherfucking dumbass.
That's the
and
one.
that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Whereas Marty and Dana would just laugh and be like, oh yeah, we're morons. White Sox Dave would like fight tooth and nail to like prove his point.
I feel like if I lived with Marty and Dana, I would walk in and be like, what are you guys doing? They're like, wow, we got to test out these nonstick pans with egg. I'm like, I'm going to bed.
You would pick them too.
I don't know that I would, because like I've spent so much time with Dave now where like I know how to just not engage. Like I'm just not doing it.
I have trouble with that.
Yeah, I know you do.
I have trouble with that. I always have to engage because his like just his thought process of how he thinks,
yeah,
like it just boggles me.
I know,
It
but you
really
just
does.
have to like. I remember we were. I don't even know if I should.
Like no one has, like I've said it to him before, like no one in this world constantly thinks that they're in the majority when they're mostly in the minority than him.
send him to Ukraine.
Right? I mean, it's just a fact.
Yeah,
It's just a fact.
yeah. We were at Sydney Wells's family's like property. They have like this barn, like man cave, and it was either like the Big Ten championship or it was the Big Ten championship because that was Iowa against Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. And it was me, Dave, and Sydney's producer Sean. But this is like to Dave's credit, where it was like end of a long day. Dave would say a few things, and Sean just kept like jabbering. And like Dave and I know each other well enough to be like, we don't need to say one single fucking word to each other. Like we're just sitting. And it doesn't have to be a spoken thing, but like, so I think like if you get to that point with Dave, like Dave's the obvious, like I'm just not talking to you.
Yeah, and listen, there's certainly a lot of times where it's just like we're fine, and you
Yeah,
can
of
just
course,
chill
yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
But
He is one of the kind though.
the dark days would be rough.
That line you just had about this guy on Twitter with 11 followers says you're wrong. That's like he thinks he just put down the ace of spades. Like
Yes.
game over.
Yes.
Yeah. He's full house.
Yes.
Yeah. Aces over kings.
Yes, and
here you go.
Yes,
He's got 11
exactly.
followers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, here you go. See, like I retweeted 3 guys this morning. Did you see that shit? Those fucking guys who sit in fucking section 333 at the U.S. Cellular Field on the south side, 35th and Shields. They say you're wrong, so you're wrong, motherfucker. And it's just he just doesn't. And that's his barometer.
Right. And he's like, what about this person? He's like, nah, fuck him. He hates
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
Like,
of course. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But
They're a lemming.
Yeah, they're a lemming.
They're a lemming.
And I was asked about. He's gonna get mad at me. Oh, why are you talking shit? I was asked.
This is great.
Yeah,
I was
that
asked.
was
I brought it up.
that was me.
I was
That was
asked.
I asked if you'd rather live with the
Was
two
asked.
idiots in New York or Dave.
But that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
All right. What a curveball to end the show. The serious show we've ever done. And then Dante is like, hey, real quick.
Real quick, let's do another 20 minutes
Yeah.
on nonsense.
Which I'm always happy to do.
Yeah.
It's probably very, serious as the show's ever been. But all right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. That's it. We'll see you tomorrow.